If you do these three things, you are 5 times richer than you think. Here is the number nobody put on the retirement planning website: 62%. That is the percentage of Americans who are doing everything their financial advisor, their HR rep, and every personal finance article ever told them to do, and still tracking toward a retirement that doesn't work. They are contributing. They are not panicking. They are staying in the market, and the math still comes out wrong. Not because they made a bad decision, because they are measuring the wrong thing entirely. That is what this video is about. Let me tell you what is actually happening out there. According to Vanguard's 2024 How America Saves report, the median retirement account balance for Americans between 45 and 54 years old is $87,000. That is not the average. Averages get pulled up by the top 5%. The median. Half of the people in their peak earning years, the decade the financial industry calls your golden contribution window, have less than $90,000 saved. And most of them have been doing the right things. They opened the account, they set up the automatic contribution, they picked a diversified fund, they did not sell in 2020 or 2022 when everyone around them was losing their mind. They stayed in. And they have $87,000. They feel behind. They feel like something is broken. And when they try to diagnose what went wrong, they land on the same answer almost every time. I need a better return. That diagnosis is wrong. And that wrong diagnosis is costing the average American investor somewhere between $300,000 and $900,000 over a 30-year period. I am going to show you the math on that in a few minutes. But first, I need you to hold an image in your head that is going to make everything else in this video click. Think about a garden hose on a hot afternoon. You turn it on, you wait. And for the first 15 or 20 seconds, what comes out is not cold water. It is the warm, stale water that has been sitting in the hose all day. The cold water from the source is already moving through the pipe. It is already on its way. But you have to clear the warm water out first before you feel it. Most investors give up during the warm water phase. They check the balance after 2 years, after 4 years, after 6 years of consistent investing and think, this cannot be right. The cold water must not be coming. And then they do something. They switch the fund. They redirect contributions. They try a different strategy. They introduce complexity. And every time they do that, they are pointing the hose at a different spigot and starting the wait all over again. The cold water was 45 seconds away. They never felt it. The 3 things I am going to show you today are not complicated. They are not secret. What they share is that none of them involve finding a better investment. All 3 of them are about clearing the warm water faster so the cold water arrives years earlier than your current trajectory suggests. And the difference between your cold water arriving at 51 versus 56 is not a minor scheduling inconvenience. It is calculable. It is large. And by the end of this video, you will have a specific number for your own situation. Before I get to the 3 things, I need to destroy the most expensive myth in personal finance. And I want to be precise about why it is expensive, not just wrong. The myth is this: if your retirement savings feel slow, you need a better return rate. It feels logical. It feels like the kind of rational, analytical move a smart person makes. Look at the numbers, identify what is underperforming, find something that performs better. The financial media loves this framing because it generates content. Better fund versus worse fund. Active management versus passive. International diversification versus domestic concentration. Sector rotation, thematic investing. All of it orbits the same assumption: your return rate is the lever. Here is what the data says. Dalbar, the financial analytics firm that has tracked actual investor behavior since the 1980s, publishes an annual report called The Quantitative Analysis of Investor Behavior. Their 2024 edition found that the average equity fund investor captured 6.9% annually over the prior 20 years. The S&P 500 returned 10.2% annually over the same period. That 3.3 percentage point gap is not fees. It is not bad fund selection. It is the behavioral cost of trying to optimize return rate. People moved to higher return-looking funds right after they ran. They moved to cash right before recoveries. They chased and they fled in a perfectly timed sequence of self-destruction, driven entirely by the belief that the lever was return rate. Meanwhile, the investor who picked a boring total market index fund in 2004 and literally never touched it captured close to the full 10.2%, not because they were disciplined, because they were not watching. Now let me show you what the return rate myth costs in real dollars. Two investors. Both start at 40 years old with $87,000, the actual median. Both contribute $500 a month for 25 years until 65. Investor A earns 6.9% annually, the Dalbar actual average, the result of actively trying to optimize. Investor B earns 9% annually, not the full market return, a conservative index fund result net of a low expense ratio. The only variable is the return. Investor A at 65, approximately $690,000. Investor B at 65, approximately $1,060,000. The difference is $370,000, and Investor A was trying harder. Investor A was reading articles, watching videos, making decisions, staying informed. The effort produced a worse outcome than inaction. That is not a quirk. That is the consistent 30-year finding of the most rigorous behavioral finance data set in existence. So if the return rate is not the lever, what is? Here is where I want to introduce someone. His name is Daniel. He is 51 years old, lives outside of Columbus, Ohio, works as a regional operations manager for a logistics company, earns $94,000 a year. He has been contributing to his company 401k since 2009, never missed a contribution, never sold during a downturn, picked a target date fund at enrollment and left it there. His balance today is $112,000. He ran the numbers. If he keeps doing exactly what he is doing, he projects out to roughly $340,000 by 65. His company matches the first 3%, so he contributes 3%. $112,000 after 15 years of perfect behavior. He feels behind. He is right about the number. He is completely wrong about why. Daniel is not in a slow investment vehicle. Daniel is in the warm water phase with the hose pointed at a perfectly good spigot. What he does not realize yet is that 3 specific low-friction changes to his architecture, not his fund, not his asset allocation, not his market timing, will produce a number closer to $850,000 by 65. Not a different investment, the same investment with different inputs. We are going to come back to Daniel at the end of this video and run his actual numbers. But first I need to show you what those 3 changes are and why each one works. The first thing is contribution right-sizing, and I need to reframe what that phrase means because it is not what you think it is. Most people hear increase your contributions, and they translate it as spend less on things you enjoy. That is the wrong frame. Here is the right one. The average American receives a meaningful income increase, raise, bonus, tax refund, paid-off loan, roughly every 14 to 18 months, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics compensation data from 2024. In nearly every one of those cases, the lifestyle absorbs the increase within 90 days, not through a deliberate decision, through what behavioral economists call hedonic adaptation, the quiet, automatic upgrade of baseline comfort that happens when more money exists in the environment. The grocery cart gets slightly better. The streaming subscriptions add one more tier. The car gets replaced 2 years earlier than planned. Nobody decided to spend more. The money found its destination on its own. This process has a name in behavioral economics. Shlomo Benartzi and Richard Thaler, in their research on automatic savings escalation published in the American Economic Review, called it the lifestyle ratchet. The ratchet clicks one direction. Income goes up, lifestyle goes up, the click is permanent. You almost never click it back down voluntarily. Contribution right-sizing is not about willpower, it is about speed. The rule that works is intercepting 50% of every net income increase before the ratchet can click. Your lifestyle still improves on the other 50%. You feel the raise. And the investment account captures fuel that would otherwise disappear into the baseline. The critical variable is same-day automation. The gap between receiving new income and executing the investment decision is where the money dies. Longer than 48 hours, and the probability of investing it drops sharply. Same-day automation eliminates the decision entirely. Now let me show you what contribution right-sizing actually produces for someone at Daniel's starting point, because the table is more persuasive than the principle. All projections use 9% annual return, monthly compounding, conservative by historical S&P 500 standards, and assume Daniel's current age of 51 with 14 years until 65. Starting balance, $112,000. At 3% contribution rate, his current setup, $546 a month going in, projected balance at 65, approximately $348,000. At 6% contribution rate, $1,092 a month, projected balance at 65, approximately $550,000. At 10% contribution rate, $1,567 a month, projected balance at 65, approximately $780,000. At 15%, his company's maximum match capture plus personal contribution, $2,350 a month, projected balance at 65, approximately $1,040,000. The return rate is identical across every scenario. The fund is identical. The market is identical. The only variable is contribution level, and the terminal balance moves from $348,000 to over $1 million. That is not optimization. That is architecture. The financial services industry does not talk about this because there is no product attached to it. No advisor earns a fee for telling you to increase your 401k contribution by 3 percentage points. No fund company profits when you redirect a car payment into an index fund. The monetizable conversation is always about which fund, which allocation, which strategy. The unmonetizable conversation, the one that actually moves outcomes, is how much goes in, and whether you automated it before the lifestyle found it first. By the way, if you are getting value from this, please subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow and means YouTube keeps showing this content to people who need it. The second thing is expense ratio surgery, and I want to give you the specific number the Department of Labor buried in a report that most people have never read. A 1% difference in annual fees will reduce your retirement account balance by 28% at retirement, not 1% less, 28% less. That is the Department of Labor's own calculation, published in a 2012 advisory bulletin on 401k fee disclosure. 28%. On Daniel's projected $780,000 balance, 28% is $218,000. Gone. Not lost to a market crash, not lost to a bad fund call, transferred, cleanly, invisibly, automatically, to fund managers who statistically did not outperform the index. Morningstar's 2024 fund fee study found that the average expense ratio for an actively managed U.S. equity mutual fund sits at approximately 1% annually. Many employer-sponsored plans carry blended expense ratios between 1 and 1.5% because the plan administrator selected the default options and nobody in HR was running the math on what those fees compound to over 30 years. The index fund alternative inside the same plan, and it almost always exists inside the same plan, typically carries an expense ratio between 0.03 and 0.15%. The difference between 1% and 0.05% sounds like noise. Here is what it sounds like translated into dollars at Daniel's balance level. $112,000 at 9% gross return for 14 years. Approximately $339,000 at net 9%. The same $112,000 at 8% net, after a 1% fee drag, grows to approximately $293,000. That is $46,000 from fees alone on just the existing balance, before accounting for 14 more years of contributions being eaten at the same rate. The damage is invisible in the early years. When Daniel had $12,000 and the fee was $120 a year, it did not register. It registers now, and the action takes 12 minutes. Log into the plan, find the Fund Details tab, look for the expense ratio column. If any number is above 0.5%, check whether a comparable index fund exists in the same plan. Switch. Set it. Never think about it again. That 12-minute decision, executed today at Daniel's balance, is worth more per hour than virtually any income-generating activity available to him. It is the highest return per minute financial decision most Americans have available to them right now, and 67% of 401k participants have never looked at their expense ratio, according to a 2023 TIAA financial literacy survey. The system is not designed to make this easy to find. The expense ratio is not on the front page of most plan dashboards. It is in the Fund Details tab, behind a click, in a smaller font, next to a lot of other numbers. That is not an accident. The fund company earns more when you do not look. Your job is to look. The third thing is sequence protection, and this is the one that catches people who did everything else right. I need to set up why this matters before I give you the mechanism, because without the context, it sounds like conservative advice for nervous investors. It is not conservative advice. It is the structural difference between a retirement plan that works and one that fails despite a lifetime of correct behavior. Here is the underlying problem. While you are working and contributing, a bad market year is uncomfortable but mathematically fine. You are buying shares at a discount. You are adding to the pile during a sale. The second decade of a bad sequence, when you have a large base and you are still contributing, is actually accelerating your eventual outcome because your contributions buy more units at lower prices. The math inverts the moment you stop contributing and start withdrawing. When you are retired and selling shares to pay for groceries and mortgage and utilities, a bad year in the first 3 to 5 years of retirement forces you to sell shares at the bottom to fund living expenses. Those shares are gone permanently. They will not benefit from the recovery. Your base is smaller going into the rebound, which means the rebound produces less absolute dollars than it should. This is called sequence of returns risk, and researchers William Bernstein and Michael Kitchis have both published extensive work showing it is the single largest determinant of whether a retirement plan survives, larger than average return rate, larger than withdrawal rate, larger than starting balance. Two investors, same everything. Same starting balance at retirement of $800,000. Same 4% withdrawal rate, $32,000 a year. Same average return over 30 years of retirement. Investor A hits a 25% decline in years 1 and 2 of retirement. Investor B hits the same 25% decline in years 23 and 24. Investor A runs out of money between years 15 and 18. Investor B dies in his late 80s with over $600,000 still in the account. Same money, same rate, same average return, different sequence. The sequence protection mechanism is not complicated. It is a cash buffer, 1 to 2 years of living expenses held in short-term, low-volatility assets like money market funds or short-duration treasury funds, built deliberately in the 3 to 5 years before your target retirement date. If the market drops 30% in your first year of retirement and you have an 18-month cash buffer, you live off the buffer. You do not touch the portfolio. You give the compounding engine time to recover before you start drawing on it. The second employee keeps working undisturbed while you live off the reserves you deliberately staged. This decision must be made before retirement, not during it. Because the moment the market is already down and you are panicking is the worst possible moment to be designing your withdrawal strategy. And here is the part nobody explains about the timing. The buffer needs to start accumulating 3 to 5 years before your retirement date, which means if you are 51, the window to start thinking about this opens at approximately 58. That is 7 years from now for Daniel. Not urgent today. But the decision about when to start building it needs to be made now, not at 58 when the retirement date is suddenly close enough to feel real and the temptation to stay fully invested is at its highest. Now I want to come back to Daniel because the abstract becomes real when it has a number attached to a specific person. Daniel, 51, Columbus, Ohio, $94,000 a year, $112,000 in his 401k, contributing 3%, target date fund, 15 years of perfect behavior. He ran the numbers and projected $348,000 by 65. He felt behind. He was right about the number. He was wrong about the cause. Here is what Daniel's situation actually looks like when you run all 3 changes simultaneously, using 9% annual return, 14 years to 65, starting balance of $112,000. Current path, 3% contribution, 1% blended expense ratio, no sequence buffer plan, $348,000 at 65. After change one only, contribution increased to 10%, same fees, no buffer plan yet, $680,000. After change 1 and 2, 10% contribution, expense ratio cut to 0.08% via index fund switch inside the same plan, $740,000. After all three changes, 10% contribution, low expense ratio, cash buffer accumulation scheduled to begin at 58, approximately $850,000 at 65 with a structurally protected withdrawal phase. Daniel went from $348,000 to $850,000. Same fund universe, same market, same Daniel, same income. The difference is $500,000 from three decisions that required no extraordinary discipline, no new investment product, no market timing, and no reduction in quality of life that Daniel would actually feel on a day-to-day basis. He is not 5 times richer than he thought in absolute dollar terms, but his retirement outcome is roughly 2.4 times larger than his current trajectory suggested. That reframe, from $348,000 to $850,000, is what the title means. You are measuring your wealth by the number on your statement today. The real number is the terminal outcome of your current architecture, and most people's architecture is leaking in 3 specific fixable places that nobody in the financial services industry is incentivized to point out. The industry profits from the conversation about which fund. It does not profit from the conversation about how much you contribute, what the fee column says, or whether you have staged a cash buffer for the sequence problem. Those 3 conversations are yours to have with yourself. Here is what I want you to understand about why this information is hard to find. It is not hidden in academic journals. It is not suppressed by a conspiracy. It is structurally invisible because the financial media is built on the economics of attention and the economics of product sales. Contribution level discussions do not generate clicks. There is no compelling thumbnail for increase your 401k by 3% and automate it before your lifestyle notices. There is a compelling thumbnail for the 5 stocks that will beat the market in 2026. Expense ratio surgery is not a product. Sequence of returns protection is not a fund you can sell. The content that gets made is the content that generates revenue for someone. The content that actually moves outcomes for the average investor. Steady contribution increases, low-cost index exposure, sequence protection, generates revenue for almost nobody, so it does not get made. And you sit with a 3% contribution rate on a 401k that charges 1.1% in annual fees, projecting $348,000, wondering why your consistent, responsible behavior is producing disappointing results. You are not doing anything wrong. You are operating inside an architecture that was designed by people whose financial interests are not the same as yours. That is the real diagnosis. The frustration is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you have been measuring the wrong variable. Now let me give you 3 specific actions calibrated to exactly what we covered, with minimum friction and exact next steps. No vague intentions. No schedule it for later. These are decisions you make today. The first action: log into your retirement account this week and find your blended expense ratio. Not this month. This week. Go to the Fund Details tab, not the main balance screen, the Fund Details tab, and look for the column labeled Expense Ratio. Write down the number. If it is above 0.5%, use the search function inside your plan to find the lowest cost index fund available in the same plan. Almost every large employer plan carries a total market or S&P 500 index fund at under 0.15%. Switch your current holdings to that fund and change your future contribution direction to the same fund. This takes 12 minutes. The long-term value of that 12 minutes at a balance of $100,000 or more is conservatively north of $50,000 over a 15-year horizon. No other professional activity you could perform in 12 minutes comes close to that return per hour. The second action: identify your next income event and pre-decide the split today in writing before the money exists. When is your next raise, bonus, tax refund, or loan payoff realistically arriving? Write the approximate month. Write the expected net amount. Write the specific percentage, not a vague intention, a specific percentage, you will redirect to your retirement contribution the day it lands. The decision made right now in the abstract, while there is no actual cash in your hand, is the one that executes correctly. The decision made in the moment while holding newly available money almost never goes to investments. Your future self handed new income without prior written instructions will spend it. Your current self making the decision in writing today will invest it. This is not discipline. It is decision architecture. You are removing the moment of choice from a high temptation environment and placing it here in a low temptation environment where the math is visible and the lifestyle has not yet recalibrated to expect the money. The third action, write down the year you plan to retire and subtract 5. That is the year your cash buffer accumulation window opens. If that year is more than 10 years away, put a calendar reminder on that date with the words, "Start building 1 year of expenses in money market." If that year is within 10 years, calculate what 1 year of your current living expenses looks like and divide that number by the months remaining until that target year. That is your monthly buffer contribution target starting now. The buffer is not a separate savings account you fund instead of your retirement account. It is a deliberate staging of a portion of contributions in the final accumulation years so that your first years of withdrawal are not dependent on market performance to fund basic living. This one structural decision, made years before it matters, is the difference between the investor whose plan survives a bad first sequence and the investor who runs out of money at 81 despite having done everything right for 30 years. Here is the number I want to leave you with. According to Vanguard's 2024 retirement research, the average American who retires at 65 has a roughly 40% chance of living to 87 or beyond. 40%. That means a retirement account needs to last 22 or more years for a large portion of the people reading this. At a 4% withdrawal rate, an $800,000 portfolio produces $32,000 a year. A $350,000 portfolio produces $14,000 a year. The difference between Daniel's current trajectory and his corrected trajectory is not a number on a screen. It is $18,000 a year for potentially 22 years of retirement. It is the difference between a retirement that works and one that requires part-time work into your early 70s while hoping your health cooperates. The 3 changes cost Daniel nothing he will feel today. The cost of not making them is calculable, and it compounds every single month. The architecture stays unchanged. The hose is pointing at a perfectly good spigot. The cold water is on its way. The only question is whether you are going to keep waiting, or whether you are going to clear the warm water out faster so the cold water arrives years earlier than your current numbers suggest. The math already works. The architecture just needs 3 adjustments. And the investors who figured that out were almost always the ones who were boring to talk to about money in their 50s and completely, quietly, embarrassingly comfortable by their late 60s. If this video changed how you see your own numbers, subscribe. It is the only way YouTube keeps showing this content to people who need it, and this is exactly the kind of analysis I publish every week.